Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. And you've seen us a lot in the kitchen lately, and some in the garden, but you really haven't seen us planning. Now, planning is an integral part of growing a garden. For some folks, you're just grabbing a couple of plants down at the local store, tossing them into pots, and growing something cool. But if you're actually trying to preserve things, you really need to be making something a little bit more firm of a plan. And, you know, as we've been doing things like producing this relish, it sort of brought back to me how I do some of my basic planning every year. Come on into the pantry and I'll show you. Obviously, we don't produce even a small portion of this. Lots of basics that we keep on hand. Everything from canned tuna to canned salmon. Things like this we did ourselves. Those are pinto beans, black beans, broths that we made ourselves, dilly beans, jellies and jams and broths, and then down at the bottom, basics, things like baking powder, that sort of stuff. So why would I bring you in someplace like this to talk about planning? Actually, what brought this all to mind today was the fact that I'm reorganizing my canned food storage. I do this multiple times a year, and I know there's people who really never really take their pantry apart. And have we ever gone through phases? We've probably gone through some phases where we were a little less careful about our pantries. But the shortages that COVID has brought has reminded us why we like to have good-sized pantries. You won't find little teeny tiny containers of much of anything. Red wine vinegar is purchased in 1-gallon containers. So is apple cider vinegar. And actually, things like regular vinegar, usually purchased by the case. They usually come either 2 or 3 to the case. Why would we do that? Well, first of all, we live a long distance from our sources. The only thing we have in town here, and town is about 8 miles away, is a Family Dollar store and a couple of convenience stores. They have been a total godsend. It means that if we just need a quart of milk or something like that, we can get it in town. Your prices are going to be higher. They're not going to have any quantity thing. Everything's going to be in small containers. It's still more than worth it. There's been several times when I was like 1 can of beans short of being able to finish a project. I popped into Family Dollar, picked it up, finished the project. But I don't like to do that. We like to not be caught short. Best way to put it. This is sort of relevant right now because we're planning our gardens for the fall, winter, and spring. And we're also thinking towards what we're going to do next year. Now let me show you what's left of last year's tomato sauce. I just happen to have it up on top of the freezer. From last year's tomato harvest, this is what we have left. We have 12 pints of tomato sauce and 6 half pints. Not bad. I mean, it's most of the way through August, almost September now, and we still have this much of last year's tomato sauce left. Now, why would I want to have leftover tomato sauce? Well, very simple reason. I want to make sure I have enough tomatoes to last me until this year's tomato sauce. This is this year's tomato sauce so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. 29 jars. These are half pints. Now, why would I do things in half pints? Well, because that's the most commonly used quantity of tomato sauce in our house. That is what we use for pizza on Friday night. So my goal for this year is probably at least 50 jars, so not quite twice as much as this, of tomato sauce in the half pints. And after that, I will do a few pints, because it is nice to have larger quantities if you're doing, lasagna or something like that. But to be honest, we don't eat a huge amount of pasta. Henry's a diabetic, and we've never been humongous pasta eaters, except when we had large quantities of teenagers running through our house on a regular basis, in which case there were always pans of pre-cooked lasagna available for anyone who was hungry. When I'm planning, I think in terms of where I'm going to be storing stuff, how much room I have, what size jars they should be in, how much space there is in general. This shelf here needs to be restocked. That has to come from ye old big box store. This is our nut shelf. Pecans, walnuts, almonds. We need more. We're really, really, really low, pretty much out of a couple of things. As I'm planning, I'm thinking in terms of all the things I want access to. So, for instance, we're not big jelly and jam eaters here. We really aren't. But sometimes they can be used as ingredients. So, apricot, apple, pear, plum, cherry, apple. There's not enough room on the top shelf for all the apple butter. Fig. And then there's some commercially produced pieces in here too, because we also buy a type of fig spread here, and there's our favorite cherry spread that we buy at the grocery store there. But I'll reorganize a little bit more, and it'll help me plan. My goal is for this area here to be full of the relishes and stuff like that Henry really likes to eat. It's easy access. He doesn't have to get up on a ladder. He can grab it when he wants it. The nuts are used frequently, super frequently. Hershey's Cocoa, that's backstock. So it doesn't need to be as accessible. And there's more backstock down here, sort of below convenient levels. You'll see a lot of things I'll mark like this. When it comes into the house, it gets marked. And if I discover something slid behind, I always mark it. 722, That way when new stuff comes in, you don't use the new stuff, you use the old stuff first. And that's an important part of planning. Some of our planning has to do with what we're putting away. There is no purpose in doing something that you don't like. For instance, a couple of years ago, we had access to a bunch of prickly pear fruit. Now, in New Mexico, we used to can prickly pear jam, jelly, and we loved it. Well, you know what? I don't know how much of it's the difference in the variety of prickly pear and how much the difference is in the way we did it, but we didn't like what we made here. We will try it again. We're going to go back to the old technique that we used in New Mexico of completely peeling the prickly pears before we process them to see if that changes the flavor, but we'll do it just one more time. And if it doesn't bring it to where we want it to be, we won't do it again. We have a whole stack of potatoes over here that we harvested the other day. And man, I tell you what, these French fingerlings are delicious. And we have bunched a whole stack of them already. But we have a bunch of them that are damaged. And the plan is in the next day or two, we're going to sit down with a couple of paring knives, cut off all the bad stuff, and that'll be canned up because that is the best way for us to save it. We've had really good success with canned potatoes, and we know we'll eat those. So it's a combination of convenience and what we know we'll eat. We're not in a life and death situation. So we don't feel like we have to save everything, but yet we do not like to waste things. The fig preserves that we have are delicious, and this is going to sound weird, on hamburgers. My daughter put us onto that. The other ones are great on toast or as part of ingredients for other things. We want to experiment a little bit. We have some apricot in there that I think will make some dynamite glazes and things like that. Because we just don't eat that much bread, and therefore we don't eat that much jellies and jams, it tends to sit there and not get used up at a real rapid pace. So we're going to be looking more seriously into what we can use those things as ingredients in. But what we try to do is try to preserve things. You know, we wound up with this huge, almost catastrophic quantity of cucumbers there. And I have made all kinds of pickles for Henry in the past. He's just not eating them very much right now. We have too many fresh veggies. So, because pretty much everybody in my family prefers fresh veggies to something pickled. I will make more pickles this year. There's a specific type that he really likes that I will make. But regular pickles, probably not. But I thought relish. So we've made 2 big batches of relish. Well, not giant. We made a half batch of the first, so I've got 8 jars of that. And we've got 11 jars of the other relish. And he's already munching that. There was a partial jar, and he's really liked that one. 11 jars of relish will probably keep him until next summer. Unless he goes on some sort of a relish kick, in which case, well, he runs out. But that's the whole point, is to be able to enjoy what you're putting up and make plans for next time. What are we going to do differently next summer? We don't have all our duckies in a row yet on that. We were talking extensively while we were making tomato sauce this week about which tomatoes we were really impressed with. They've produced well. They're not particularly sensitive to disease. Despite the fact that they were beat to death by major hailstorms, they still managed to come back and give us an awful lot. That sounds like a win-win to me. So some of the varieties we grew this year will definitely be on the list for next year. We will probably grow a few less of the heirloom tomatoes next year. We don't have the water to waste. That's what it comes down to. Even if we manage to get all our ducks in a row, which we're crossing fingers on, and come up with our new water solutions, water is still always going to be a commodity for us. Unless we won the lottery, you know, like one of those multi-million-dollar lotteries, and we put in a well, it'll always be a commodity for us. Because we live in the American Southwest, and water is going to be becoming an increasingly rare commodity down here. It just is. I anticipate more and more water shortages everywhere in California, the Southwest, maybe even other parts of the United States. The places that are not going under with water are, I remember when we lived in Maine, there was one summer when a lot of the shallow wells went dry. It can happen. It can happen anywhere pretty much. And as the aquifers are lowered by continuous pumping, and, you know, those golf courses, they take an awful lot of water. Big push against the problem of golf courses. I know that people love to play golf, but for gosh sakes, keeping all that green out there takes a huge volume of water. And if it's a choice between having almond trees and other things that use large quantities of water and having a golf course, I think you can probably guess where my vote is. Until next time, bye. And don't forget, keep on brainstorming.